So on the A minor waltz, I'm going to talk about ways of practicing it so that you have incremental, layered practicing. I would outline first the fundamental bass. So it would be the downbeats of every measure. And I would take note if there are any patterns that I would see in the flow of the downbeats. I see consecutive fourths at the beginning. That helps you organize what's going on. And also the harmony is important too. Oh, harmony is always helping phrasing. So in A minor, we're starting with the A, and use a wrist approach to these fundamental basses. You don't want to have any pencil point sounds with this waltz. So, you can count slowly. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, resolve, 2, 3, 2, 3. What's very interesting is you have two afterbeat chords. I would always lighten the third beat in a waltz. Always lighten the third beat. Now, we're not going to yet do rubato quite yet. So if you do the afterbeats alone, you would have rest. The rest is the downbeat. Rest. A little lighter. Rest. That's the 4 chord here. It's the secondary dominant. For a moment, he goes to the relative major of C major. You should know that. Then light, lean, light. Dominant 7 of C major, split chord here. He splits the 3rd and the 5th, and then he resolves it. And the way you play these afterbeats, very spongy approach to them, so that you don't stiffen up your hand, but you have, again, that very round, beautiful singing tone. You're looking for a singing tone all the time in this. And so you want to get used to that progression of the fourths and a little bit of the secondary dominant. Just have a sense of that. In the right hand, now this is a little bit tricky because you want to poetically play this beautiful line. And when you have now in the first measure 2 C's next to each other, you have to resist them being played the same C, C. They have to be like poetically rendered, and you have to get the feeling that the composer is basically outlining a scale. Once he gets to the first measure, the scale is do, re, mi, fa, sol. And I didn't play the repeated C because overall you're thinking of that scale. So you don't want to interrupt with 2 C's and have the C get you hung up. You want to float the first C almost like the second one is basically floating through that note C instead of And here's what I mean. So what I did was I made that C of the first measure that's on beat number 3 rather soft. And that comports with the idea of the third beat being lifted up. And I had the idea of the scale. The one scale in my mind is roll into the... My destination was the long note, the half note. You have to have a kind of destination in these phrases. Where am I going and how am I getting there? So if you go slowly, what I usually tell students to do is things like this. Do the fundamental bass and the melody first, like this. Without the pedal first, what I'm doing. I'm continuing. So you see how that's a first step. Crescendo, to down. Now these are things where, in this part of the phrase where you have this, has to be very round, so you don't want to do finger poking there. You want to loop it around. If you sing it, and I'm always vocal modeling, my voice isn't good tonight, my singing voice, but the idea is sorry for the singing voice, but you're going, your destination note is the A, but it's not an angular A. It's going around the A. Now, how do you do that physically? You have to have a physical approach that matches what you're imaging as your sound, that what you want to produce. And then here's the problem, is you have to know, what do I do to get that sound? I know I can't use finger pokes. I can't use stabbings at the notes. I have to somehow have a choreography that gets me there. Now, when you play this is decaying. Come in on the decay here. Notice how I went wrist forward at the end. The reason is it's a cadence, dominant, tonic, and C. You went to the relative major. So that's, you have to be aware of how do I do what I want to hear. Now remember, we started with melody and the fundamental bass. Now you can also do the melody and just the after beats. That's beats number 2 and 3 in the left hand. So you would still contour your melody like you had planned to do. That scale that's going to its destination F. The loop around notes that come around with a little rotation. Going to the secondary dominant C major. Now you can do this. I'm just giving you an overview of how I do this and when I practice it. Now notice the upbeat must be really soft. Very soft. Light. See, that was a resolution, remember? Resolve to C major. And then the second time, I'm doing only the after beats and the melody. Dip down. So that was my second operation. My second process was melody and after beats. So this is what you should do. Fundamental bass alone, after beats alone, melody alone, melody and fundamental bass, melody and after beats, second and third beats. So you're ready now at this first stage for what I just did to put it all together. I haven't used the pedal yet, because you need the pedals, another story. So light to destination, dip down. It sounds dry because I'm not using pedal. Now remember, when something's decaying a note, you don't come in and interrupt the dissolution or the dissolving of that note. You come in to match the decay on that note. And that's an important thing, particularly in this romantic music, because it has to have continuity from what came before. You're listening really carefully to your dissolving half note there. And that's tricky where you have it's dissolving. Soft. See, you come in soft. Now remember, the two C's don't sound the same. Light. Dip down. I'm adding pedal now, you can hear that. I mean, you want to add the pedal after you can play really clearly without the pedal and get the lighter third beats. Very important to lift your third beats. So that's my process. And I would recommend that process be used, that order of how I layered things with the whole piece. You have to do that. So that we get that out of the way. That has to be done through the whole piece. So we did the phrasing here pretty well. Now this new section, the B section, he kind of lets the cat out of the bag. You kind of feel like he's improvising. He's saying, "Oh, be free now." And now you have this scale that ascends in the melodic minor. If you look at the melodic A minor, you will have to raise F to F sharp and G to G sharp, right? Sounds almost like a major scale, except for the first half has the lower third. So he's starting on the 5th degree of the melodic minor. Again, do all that process of fundamental bass alone, afterbeat chords alone, fundamental bass and melody, fundamental bass and afterbeat chords, and do the afterbeat chords and the melody. So there's a lot of steps to do. So we don't need to rehash all of the steps. Assuming you do all of the steps, you come to this middle section, you kind of become much freer. He's sort of like letting you loose a little bit. He brings up the dynamics to mezzo forte here too. So now I'm playing behind tempo. Now again, when you balance your hands, you want to drag the upstairs, drag the notes, drag them so you don't get finger punching up and down sound. Sideways, kind of dragging, horizontal. Sequence comes down. Least. Notice how the sequence is down. Now with the ornaments, make sure they're on the beat and that they're not crowded and squeezed out like that they went by. They are part of the melody. Now here is where he really improvises. He improvises. Resolve. Remember, I'm way behind tempo. So you can see what I did. I weighed in as I did my crescendo. Triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's one line. Lift the third beat. I think lifting the third beat really helps Chopin's, I hate to say Chopin's sound, but the Chopin character in this is lifting the third beat. So this next part is similar to the beginning, except he has a modulation to a secondary dominant of the dominant of A major. He's going to go into the parallel major. And this is a dominant of the dominant, which you have. Keep that. Now that's your signal to the climax. Always lift the third beat in the left hand. So you have roll into the forte. Slowly. 1, 2, 3, 2, back into the keys, but roll in horizontal. And this whole section is going to repeat. But remember, the climax of this piece is this long stream of notes in A major. This is the big cheese of this waltz. And so get deeper into the keys and horizontally drag these notes. And make the ornament melodic. Pull it back a little there. Back into the keys, but roll into the dead weight. Okay, now we come to the very end, and this to me is a memory. When you do all the repeats, you're going to do the repeats of this section. Then you come back, what is to me a memory of the beginning, and it would be the softest playing of the theme. It's come back a few times, right? So I whisper, but I still do the shaping. Light under around to E, destination E. Pick up it up in the decay. Always listen to the note before. And under. Then there's a little advance to there. And bass. 2, 3. Then drag this. And this you can do either on the principal note or the upper neighbor. There. What I do here at the end is an interesting thing. Because what he has here is a 2/7 chord when he does this. I let that totally melt. So I come down a little deeper in the keys. I come down, drag. Then I come up softer. You can do it. I use the fingering 1, 3, 2, 3. For me, that rotating the fingers gives me a better trill because the fingers don't get tired with 3, 2, 3, 2 or 3, 1, 3, 1. and it's a very kind of brief trill, so it's not a big deal. But you can get that shimmer if you do 3 2 1 3 2 3 1 3 2 3. Not too loud. When you learn it, you have to do the stages, as I showed you. Do the stages and do incremental layered practicing.